Hello, it's David here. Welcome to your first proper academic writing class. Today we're looking at sentences. So, I've heard it said that the very shortest sentence you can have in English is just the order go. So, as a basic rule, the least a sentence needs is a verb. Typically, of course, you have a subject and a verb, so I go, or whatever. And often you have direct, indirect objects, and so on. Notice if I say, I will open the door when they arrive. The whole thing there is a sentence. If I say, I will open the door, that's a sentence. We've got subject, verb, and in this case, a direct object. It expresses a whole idea or thought. When they arrive, by itself, that's not a sentence, that's a subclause, Nebensatz in German. And that doesn't count as a sentence. So a sentence has to have a main clause, Hauptsatz. And in this video, we're going to look at 5 typical mistakes that people make with sentences. These are mistakes which I do see in people's work. And we'll learn a little bit more about sentences as we look at the mistakes. So first of all, I'd like you to do the exercise on StudIP and then come back. Number 1. I took the bus to work, full stop. It was cold, full stop. Here we have 2 sentences. One of them is the idea I took the bus to work, and the other sentence is it was cold. But here it's been written without a full stop, but we need that. Or we need some kind of a linking word, a conjunction. For instance, you could say, I took the bus to work because it was cold, or as it was cold. Number 2, Sarah likes animals, full stop. She has a horse and 2 dogs, full stop. Yet again, 2 sentences, but here it was written without a full stop. The second one is explaining more about how she likes animals. So you could actually say, Sarah likes animals, full stop. Indeed, comma, she has a horse and 2 dogs. Full stop. Number 3. Fred does not come from the United States, full stop. He comes from Canada, full stop. Yet again, as you can see, that needs to be written as 2 sentences and not as one long sentence without a full stop between, to show that you've got 2 sentences. You might think this is a very, very elementary mistake, but I do sometimes see it. I keep saying full stop because I'm British. Americans use the word period. This first type of mistake, when there is no punctuation between 2 different sentences, is called a run-on sentence. The terminology I will use today is common in America, I believe. For me, growing up in Britain, we never used these terms. Number 1. You sleep, full stop, I will drive. Or, you sleep and I will drive. Number 2. We have ordered food, full stop. Would you like some? Number 3. Thank you for contacting us, full stop. We are looking forward to hearing from you again. And yes, that is, we are looking forward to hearing from you. We'll talk about that in a grammar class. As you can see, In each example here, we have two sentences, but instead of using a full stop or a conjunction, a comma has been used instead. This is a very, very common mistake, and if you do it, you have to make sure that you focus on not making this mistake if you make it, because it's not acceptable, quite simply, to use a comma instead of a full stop. The second kind of mistake is called a comma splice. It's a type of run-on sentence. If you have two pieces of rope and you splice them, then it means that you join them, and then you make one piece of rope. So with a comma splice, you join two sentences with a comma. But as I've said quite clearly, don't do that. Right. This might be a little more difficult. Number one, what have we got here? It says, although she said that she would never speak to him again. It could also say, even though she said she would never speak to him again. This is a sentence you might find yourself writing in a text message or on WhatsApp or whatever. Thing is though, it's not a main clause, it's a subsidiary clause. I mean, I could write this sentence quite easily, but not in academic writing. Number two, a cake for the nurses at the hospital. So who's doing what? Obviously there's no verb. You might see this underneath a picture in a newspaper, for instance, as a caption. Number three, people running in the London Marathon. Yet again, there's no main verb. If there was, it would be people are running or something like that. Yet again, this might also be a caption under a picture. What you have here is three sentences which are not proper sentences. They're not main clauses. And these have a certain name which you'll see in a moment. I might have messed up the timing on this video, but it will appear in a moment. Okay? So these are three examples of sentence fragments, just parts of sentences, but not full sentences. This is also a very common mistake, and I understand why people do it, because when we write informally, we often use sentence fragments. We use them a lot when we speak as well. We do all sorts of stuff when we speak, but they're not part of academic writing. Walking down the street, the trees looked beautiful. This is an example of a dangling modifier. After the first clause, walking down the street, comma, we expect the next word or words to be the subject of who or what, well, who was walking down the street. So this sentence makes it sound as if the trees were walking down the street and they looked beautiful while they were walking. So you might correct it by saying walking down the street, comma, I thought the trees looked beautiful. Number two, after being hit by a car, we saw the swan make a miraculous recovery. We can't tell who was hit by the car, apart from simply by using common sense. But it sounds like we were hit by the car because that's what comes after the comma. Whereas in fact, obviously it was the swan that was hit by a car. And number 3, I kind of borrowed this sentence from somewhere else on the internet and I can't remember where, and I've changed it because I can't remember how it was exactly. Covered in dust after many years in the attic, Jeremy found his old records. Yes, you've guessed it. That makes it sound as if Jeremy was covered in dust after many years in the attic. So you would probably change this sentence quite a lot. You'd probably say, Jeremy found his old records, which were covered in dust after many years in the attic. Dangling modifiers are a different kind of mistake because normally you can tell what the real meaning is, but not always. But they're an example of unclear writing, and one thing that we do want you to do is to write clearly. When you write a list with 3 items, say, you want each item to be parallel, to be expressed in the same way. So number 1, Nicola enjoys running in the mountains, swimming in the sea, and riding horses. Otherwise it sounds like she likes swimming in horses, and that doesn't make any sense. 2, George never goes to nightclubs, to saunas or parties. Ooh, stylistically that's just horrible. Either you want just the 1 2, George never goes to nightclubs, saunas or parties, or you want to repeat the word to every time. George never goes to nightclubs, to saunas or to parties. 3, Sharon has a house, a car and lived in many countries. Ouch. That's painful. When she has a house or a car, the word has means owns or possesses. When we say she has lived in many countries, that's has lived, present perfect, simple, then that's a grammatical function of the word has, okay? So what we need to do here is separate this. We can have a short list with 2 items and then the final part. So we can say, Sharon has a house and a car, and she has lived in many countries. That's the best solution there. So this final type of mistake is the use of non-parallel structures. Sometimes it might seem like a low-order concern, as if it's not so important, but as you can see, especially with the 3rd example, it can actually change the meaning or make a sentence meaningless. One thing you could do is start making an editing list. That's a place where you keep a record of all of the typical mistakes which you are aware of making, and then when you do writing you can actually check your editing list to see if you've made any of those mistakes in the work that you've written. So if you are aware that you might make some of these 5 types of mistakes we've looked at today with sentences, write them down as the first entry in your editing list, and it will be useful for you later on. Okay, that's the end of the first lesson. I'll see you again next week. Bye.